My husband brought his mistress home like a trophy, while my mother-in-law clapped as if I were just a dirty rag. They did not understand that I did not need to cry to lose or scream to win. I only needed one specific phone call. The moment the right person stepped through our door, his mistress would be the one shaking enough to drop her smile. My name is Bailey Cook. I am 34 years old. I was standing in the foyer of my two-story colonial house in Cedar Brook, Colorado. The air conditioner was humming a low, steady drone that usually made me feel safe. Today it just sounded like static. I was holding a reusable grocery bag in my right arm. The condensation from a gallon of milk was soaking through the fabric, making my skin cold. It was 5:18 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I remember the time because the grandfather clock in the hallway was just beginning to chime. The front door did not open with the usual jiggle of keys. It was thrown open with a confidence that startled me. My husband, Graham Wexler, walked in. He was not alone. He was holding the door open, acting like a valet at a high-end hotel. A woman stepped past him and into my home. She was stunning in the most aggressive way possible. Her name, I would soon learn, was Sloane Hart. She was wearing a white trench coat that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her heels were sharp, red-bottomed stilettos. She walked across my hardwood floors, the floors I had polished on my hands and knees 2 days ago, and the sound was violent. Click, clack, click. It sounded like a hammer hitting a nail. She did not look at the house with curiosity. She looked at it with ownership. I stood there, frozen. The bag of groceries was getting heavier. My fingers were starting to lose circulation. I expected an explanation. I expected Graham to look guilty. I expected him to say she was a colleague or a client. But Graham did not look at me. He looked at her. He looked at her like she was a prize he had just won at a carnival. Then I heard movement from the kitchen. My mother-in-law, Marjorie Wexler, walked out. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. Marjorie had lived in the guest suite for 3 years. I had cooked her 3 meals a day for 1,095 days. I expected her to gasp. I expected her to ask who this stranger was. Marjorie did not gasp. She smiled. It was a wide, beaming smile that showed all her teeth. She looked at the woman in the white coat and nodded. Finally, Marjorie said, "This one is actually worthy of the Wexler family name." The grocery bag slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud. A carton of eggs cracked. The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet house. Nobody flinched. Nobody moved to help me. Graham finally turned his head toward me. His eyes were empty. There was no warmth, no history, no regret. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. "Bailey, sign the papers," Graham said. His voice was flat. "We are getting a divorce. Sloane is going to be my new wife." The air left my lungs. I felt a physical blow to my chest, but I did not stumble. I looked at the woman, Sloane. She was looking at me now. Her expression was bored. It was the look you give to a waitress who has brought you the wrong order. It was the look you give to a cleaning lady who missed a spot on the carpet. She viewed me as expired staff. Sloane turned her back on me completely. She walked up to Marjorie and took both of the older woman's hands in hers. "It is so good to see you again." "Mom," Sloane said. "Mom." The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. They knew each other. This was not a sudden affair. This was a replacement strategy. This had been planned while I was doing laundry, while I was paying bills, while I was driving Marjorie to her physical therapy appointments. Marjorie patted Sloane's cheek with genuine affection. Then she turned her razor-sharp gaze back to me. Her face hardened instantly. "Do not make a scene, Bailey," Marjorie said. Her voice was ice. "This house stands in the Wexler family name. You are leaving empty-handed. Do not try to play any games with us." I could feel the scream building in my throat. I wanted to grab the vase on the entry table and shatter it against the wall. I wanted to scream until the neighbors called the police. I wanted to cry until I could not breathe, but I did not do any of those things. Something shifted in my brain. It was a physical sensation, like a switch flipping in a circuit breaker. The heat of the anger vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. I used to work in risk management. I used to analyze disaster scenarios for a living. In a crisis, emotion is a liability. Observation is the only asset. I stopped looking at them as my family. I started looking at them as targets. I observed the room. Graham was standing 3 feet to the left of the hallway painting. Behind that painting was the wall safe. He kept glancing at it. He was nervous about what was inside. Sloane was holding her phone in her left hand. The screen was facing down, but her thumb was hovering over the record button. She wanted me to attack her. She wanted a video of the crazy ex-wife to show to the judge. Marjorie was standing with her feet apart. Blocking the entrance to the kitchen, she was guarding her territory. They were too confident. They thought they had already won. That was their first mistake. Graham reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a white envelope. It was thick. He tossed it onto the entry table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped near my keys. "Take that," Graham said. "Consider it compensation for your time." Compensation. He was paying me off like a bad investment. He was severing a 7-year marriage with an envelope of cash. I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Graham. I did not pick up the groceries. I stepped over the spreading puddle of egg yolk. I walked to the table and picked up the envelope. I did not open it. I did not throw it back in his face. I simply put it in my purse. I looked at Sloane. She was waiting for the explosion. She was waiting for the satisfaction of seeing me break. I gave her the one thing she did not expect. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was barely visible. It was a small, tight lifting of the corners of my mouth. It was the smile of someone who knows the end of the movie while everyone else is still watching the beginning. Sloane froze. Her smile faltered. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She blinked. Twice. I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She sensed it. She sensed that something was wrong. She realized, in that split second, that the script was not going the way she had imagined. I did not say a word. I did not say goodbye. I turned around, opened the front door, and walked out into the cold Colorado evening. I left the door wide open behind me. The cold wind rushed into the perfect, warm house, chilling them all. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away without looking back. I drove my sedan to the far end of a 24-hour diner parking lot and cut the engine. The silence inside the car was heavy, but it was the first time in 5 years that the silence belonged to me. I stared at the dashboard, my mind rewinding the tape of my marriage, not to mourn it, but to dissect it. I needed to understand how a woman who used to assess million-dollar threats for a living had failed to see the threat sleeping in her own bed. Before I was Bailey Wexler, the invisible housewife, I was Bailey Cook, a senior risk management specialist at Northline Advisory. I was the person companies called when they wanted to know where they were bleeding money. I had a sharp eye for inconsistencies. I could spot a fraudulent invoice from 50 yards away. But then I met Graham. He was charming, ambitious, and persistent. When we got married, he painted a picture of a life that looked like a sanctuary. He told me that my job was too high stress, that it was eating me alive. He said he wanted a partner who made the house a home, not a roommate who was always checking emails. I believed him. I resigned from Northline Advisory 4 years and 6 months ago. I thought I was choosing love. Looking back, I realized I was signing a voluntary demotion. The dismantling of my confidence was not an explosion. It was erosion. It started with Marjorie. My mother-in-law did not just dislike me. She viewed me as a genetic error in the Wexler timeline. She treated my background like a stain on the carpet that she could not scrub out. I remember the first Thanksgiving she hosted. I was wearing a dress I had bought with my own savings, a simple navy shift. Marjorie looked me up and down while holding a glass of Chardonnay and asked if I had purchased it at a discount outlet. She told me my vowels were too flat, that I sounded like I was from nowhere. When she caught me reading a novel in the sunroom, she would sigh loudly and ask if I had finished the laundry yet, implying that reading was a luxury for people who actually contributed to society. Then came the financial strangulation. It was subtle at first. Marjorie suggested she could help manage the household accounts since she was home all day, and I was busy with the cleaning and cooking. It sounded helpful. Graham agreed immediately. Slowly, my name stayed on the account, but the access disappeared. Marjorie kept the physical joint credit card in her purse for safekeeping. She said I might lose it. If I needed to buy groceries, I was given a weekly cash allowance of $200. If I wanted to buy a new lipstick or a coffee, I had to squeeze it out of the change from the milk money. I was 34 years old, begging for permission to buy tampons. Graham played his part perfectly. He became the absent king. He started working late 3 nights a week. He called it networking. He said he was building the family legacy. He would come home smelling of scotch and a perfume that was too musky to be incidental. It was a scent I now recognized on Sloane Hart. I smelled it on her coat when she walked past me. Back then, I convinced myself I was paranoid. I told myself that successful men had to attend dinners, that he was doing this for us. I swallowed my questions because every time I asked one, Graham would look at me with weary disappointment and ask if I was going to start nagging him after he worked 12 hours to pay for the roof over my head. So I stayed silent. I bought the peace with my dignity, but the risk manager in me was not dead. She was just dormant. A few months ago, I noticed something. I was dusting the study while Graham was in the shower. His phone lit up on the desk. It was a notification from the bank, a transfer confirmation. It was for $3,500. The recipient was not the mortgage company or the utility provider. It was a name I had never seen before. Velvet Horizon Ventures. It sounded like a shell company. It sounded like a cover. I tried to ask Marjorie about it later. Casually, while we were folding towels, I asked if Graham had started investing in any new funds. Marjorie snapped at me. She told me that financial matters were for the adults in the room and that I should focus on getting the wrinkles out of the sheets. But Marjorie was not as tight-lipped with the neighbors. 2 weeks ago, I was gardening near the fence line. Marjorie was having tea on the patio with Mrs. Gable from next door. She did not know I was there. I heard her voice, loud and proud. She was bragging about Graham's connections. She said Graham had met a woman, a brilliant investor, who was going to double the family fortune. She called this woman a future daughter-in-law. She said this new woman knew how to make money, unlike the current burden Graham was stuck with. My stomach had turned to lead. It was not just an affair. An affair is a betrayal of the heart. This was a business transaction. They were moving money. They were building a life raft. And I was not on the manifest. I sat in my car in the dark parking lot, forcing my brain to connect the dots. The transfer to Velvet Horizon Ventures, the networking, Marjorie's confidence, and then a specific memory hit me hard. It was 3 months ago. It was late, almost 11 at night. Graham had come into the bedroom with a folder. He was drinking whiskey, which usually meant he was either celebrating or nervous. He told me he needed me to sign some updated insurance forms and a few tax documents. He said it was standard procedure, just refreshing the files for the accountant. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed the papers on the nightstand. He did not hand them to me. He held them down with his hand. He flipped the pages quickly. "Sign here," he had said, pointing to a yellow sticky tab. And here, and here. I reached for the papers to read the text. Graham pulled them back slightly. He laughed and said I did not need to bore myself with the fine print, that it was just legalese about beneficiary updates. He kissed my forehead. He used his charm as a weapon. He said he was tired and just wanted to get this done so we could sleep. I signed my name 3 times. I did not read the header. I did not read the clauses. I trusted the man who had vowed to protect me. Now, sitting in the cold leather seat of my car, I felt a surge of nausea. What had I signed? I reached into the back seat and grabbed my old laptop bag. I had kept it from my Northline days, hidden under the winter coats in the closet so Marjorie would not throw it out. I powered it up. The battery was low, but it had enough life. I connected to the diner's public Wi-Fi. I did not log into the joint bank account. I knew Marjorie would have changed the password by now. I logged into my old personal email, the one I used for junk mail and subscriptions. the one Graham sometimes used to forward documents when his printer was broken. I searched for his name. I scrolled past hundreds of emails about dinner reservations and flight itineraries from years ago. Then I saw it. Date: 3 months ago. Subject: scan_0994_docs_final. From Graham Wexler to Graham Wexler, BCC, bailey.cook@gmail.com. He must have blind copied my old email by mistake when he sent the file to himself to print at the office. Or maybe he sent it to store it and clicked my name by accident because it auto-populated. It did not matter how. It was there. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF file. I waited for it to load, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The screen flickered, and the document opened. It was not an insurance update. It was not a tax form. I stared at the screen, and the world tilted on its axis. The document I had signed was a power of attorney granting Graham full control over my premarital assets, specifically a savings account my grandmother had left me, an account I thought was dormant and safe, but below that, there was something else, a second document. It was a loan application, a massive line of credit secured against my credit score, authorized by my signature, with the funds directed to an account managed by Velvet Horizon Ventures. They had not just kicked me out. They had leveraged my identity to fund their new life. They had stolen my name before they stole my husband. I closed the laptop. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. I was no longer the wife standing in the hallway holding a bag of melting groceries. I was Bailey Cook, the risk manager, and I had just found the discrepancy that was going to bring the whole company down. I did not go to my best friend's house. I did not go to my sister's apartment in Boulder. Sympathy was a drug I could not afford right now. Sympathy would make me soft, and I needed to be made of steel. Instead, I drove to the edge of town and checked into the Blue Pine Motel. It was a place where people went when they did not want to be found. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker, and the room smelled of lemon disinfectant masking the scent of stale cigarettes. It was perfect. It was a war room. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and sat at the small, scratched laminate desk. I opened my laptop again. The screen was the only source of light in the room. I was no longer Bailey the wife. I was Bailey the auditor. I pulled up a blank document and created 3 columns. Column 1, Who benefits? Graham Wexler, Marjorie Wexler, Sloan Hart. Column 2, Who controls the paperwork? Graham had the originals. Marjorie had the safe. Column 3, Where is the money going? Velvet Horizon Ventures. I went back to the PDF I had found in my email. I zoomed in on the signature page. My hand hovered over the trackpad. There it was. My name. It was my handwriting, or at least a very good digital copy of it. I looked at the date stamp. It was dated 3 months ago, on a Tuesday. I checked my digital calendar on my phone. On that Tuesday, I was at the dentist getting a root canal. I was under anesthesia for 2 hours. I could not have signed a power of attorney document in front of a notary at the bank. They had forged it. Or rather, Graham had lifted my signature from a legitimate document, perhaps the tax return, and digitally grafted it onto this power of attorney. I scrolled down. The power of attorney was just the key. The door it unlocked was a home equity line of credit. They had taken out a line of credit against the house that Marjorie claimed was exclusively Wexler property, using my credit score as the guarantor. They had maxed it out. $50,000. I sat back in the cheap chair. The springs creaked. They were not just divorcing me. They were saddling me with debt while they ran off with the cash. Graham was going to let me take the fall for the loan default, while he and Sloan lived off the proceeds in whatever new life they were building. I did not cry. Tears are for people who have lost. I had not lost yet. I was just starting to play. I picked up my phone. It was 10:45 at night. I dialed a number I had memorized from a billboard I used to drive past every morning on my way to the grocery store. Lena Parkhurst, Family Law and Criminal Defense, Denver. The phone rang 4 times. I expected voicemail. Instead, a sharp, crisp female voice answered. Parkhurst, This is the emergency line. Make it quick. My name is Bailey Cook, I said, my voice steady. I need to retain you. I do not just need a divorce lawyer. I need someone who understands financial fraud. I have a waiting list of 3 months, Lena said, her tone dismissive. Call my office in the morning. My husband just kicked me out of my house. I interrupted. But before he did, he used a forged power of attorney to take out a $50,000 line of credit in my name and funneled it into a shell company. I have the PDF proof, I have the dates, and I have the motive. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the rustle of sheets, as if Lena was sitting up in bed. Do you have the document in front of you? Lena asked. Her voice had changed. The dismissal was gone. Now she sounded interested. Yes, I said. Send it to me. Right now. I forwarded the email. 2 minutes later, Lena spoke again. Bailey, listen to me very carefully. If they used your signature to secure a loan without your consent, this is not a civil dispute. This is bank fraud. This is identity theft. This is a felony. We are not going to sue them for alimony. We are going to put them in prison. A cold shiver went down my spine. It was not fear. It was anticipation. I need you to freeze everything. I said, I will have the motions ready by 9 in the morning. Lena said, but Bailey, we need to trace that shell company. I can handle the law. But you need someone to follow the money before they wash it. Do you know a forensic accountant? I hesitated. I did know one. I said, call them, Lena ordered. Tonight, if that money moves offshore, we lose it. She hung up. I stared at my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I reached the letter E. Elliot Hart. We had worked together at Northline Advisory 7 years ago. He was brilliant, obsessive, and socially awkward. I was the only one who could translate his chaotic genius into reports the board could understand. I had saved his job once when he missed a critical deadline because he was too busy chasing a discrepancy of 4 cents. He had looked at me with those intense, gray eyes and told me that he owed me a debt he could never repay. He left Northline to start his own firm, Grayquill Forensics. I heard he had become the best in the state. He investigated corporate embezzlement, hidden assets in high-profile divorces, and insurance fraud. I looked at the time. It was almost 11 at night. I hesitated. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Was I ready to drag an old friend into this mess? 4, 5, 6. Did I have a choice? 7, 8, 9. I pressed the call button. The ringback tone sounded twice. Bailey Cook? His voice was deeper than I remembered, but it had the same sharp, alert quality. He did not sound asleep. He sounded like he was in the middle of work. Elliot, I said, I need to cash in that favor. Name it, he said immediately. No small talk, no pleasantries. That was Elliot. I'm in trouble. I said, my husband has been moving money into a company called Velvet Horizon Ventures. He forged my signature. I need to know who owns that company, and I need to know where the money is really going. I heard the sound of a keyboard clacking furiously in the background. Velvet Horizon. Elliot repeated. I can run a preliminary check. Give me 30 seconds. The silence stretched. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the hum of the motel refrigerator. Bailey, Elliot said, his typing stopping abruptly. Yes? Where are you right now? I am at the Blue Pine Motel on the edge of Cedarbrook. Why? Elliot did not answer the question immediately. His voice dropped an octave. It became very quiet and very serious. You said your husband is involved? Yes. Graham Wexler. And... Elliot paused. And the air on the line felt heavy. Is there anyone else involved? A third party? I gripped the phone tighter. Yes, a woman. She came to the house today. What is her name? Elliot asked. Sloan. I said, her name is Sloan Hart. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for 5 long seconds. Then, I heard a sound I did not expect. It was a long, shaky exhale. It sounded like the breath leaving a man who had just been punched in the gut. Bailey, Elliot whispered. What is it? I asked, my heart beginning to race. Do you know her? There was a moment of hesitation. And then he dropped the bomb that would change the entire trajectory of my revenge. "I do not just know her," Elliot said, his voice trembling with a suppressed rage that matched my own. "Sloane Hart is my wife." Elliot Hart arrived at the Blue Pine Motel exactly 42 minutes after I hung up the phone. He did not hug me. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not offer empty platitudes about how Graham did not deserve me. Elliot was a man of data, and he knew that right now. I did not need comfort. I needed ammunition. He walked into the dingy room, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like he had slept in it, and tossed a heavy manila folder onto the faded floral bedspread. "Read it," Elliot said. His voice was gravelly, the sound of a man who had been screaming internally for months. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the file. The first document was a marriage certificate. It was dated 5 years ago. The names were Elliot Hart and Sloane Reynolds. "She never changed her name legally," Elliot explained, pacing the small space between the TV stand and the door. "She uses Hart socially when it suits her, and Reynolds when she opens bank accounts. We are not divorced. We are not even separated legally. She cleared out our joint checking account 6 months ago and told me she needed space to find herself." I flipped the page. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and rows of transactions. "I have been auditing my own wife for half a year," Elliot said. He stopped pacing and looked at me. His eyes were cold. Hard flint. She was the chief financial officer at a boutique marketing firm. They fired her for gross negligence, or so they thought. I suspected she was funneling money into shell companies. But she is good. Bailey. She is terrifyingly good. She covers her tracks with layers of bureaucratic noise. I could never find the final link. I could never prove where the money landed. He pointed a finger at the document in my hand. "I needed a destination," he said, "and then you called me. Velvet Horizon Ventures." I looked at the name again. It was the same company Graham was transferring our savings into. "She is not in love with your husband," Elliot said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more frightening than a shout. "Graham is not a partner. He is a host. She finds people with assets, people who are eager to prove they are successful, and she bleeds them dry. She is using Graham and your mother-in-law as mules." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Graham thought he was upgrading. Marjorie thought she had found a daughter-in-law who matched her snobbish standards. They were both wrong. They were just marks in a long con. Sloane did not care about the Wexler family name. She cared about the Wexler family credit rating. "So, what do we do?" I asked. I closed the folder. My hands were steady. "We catch them," Elliot said. "But we do not do it by storming in and shouting accusations. If you confront her now, she will spook. She will drain the accounts, claim the transfers were gifts, and disappear. She has done it before. We need criminal proof. We need to catch her accessing the funds. We need to catch her coercing Graham." He leaned in, placing his hands on the cheap desk. "I need a man on the inside. Bailey, I need someone in that house." I understood immediately. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but I did not back away. "You want me to go back," I said. "I want you to negotiate," Elliot corrected. "Get your lawyer, Lena, to draft a temporary occupancy agreement. Frame it as a surrender. Tell them you are broken. Tell them you have nowhere to go and you just need 2 or 3 weeks to pack your things and find an apartment. Tell them you will sign the divorce papers quietly if they let you stay. They will never agree to that." I said, "Sloane wants me gone. Sloane does." Elliot agreed. "But Marjorie? Marjorie loves control. If you beg, if you show her that you are destitute and pathetic, she will let you stay just to gloat. She will want a front row seat to your misery. And Sloane? Sloane is arrogant. She thinks she has already won. She won't see you as a threat. She will see you as furniture." I picked up my phone and called Lena Parkhurst. It was past midnight, but she answered on the first ring. I explained the plan. "I can have the draft ready in an hour," Lena said, her voice sharp with adrenaline. "We will call it a temporary cohabitation and asset separation agreement. It binds them to leave you alone physically, but it gives you legal access to the common areas. It is a Trojan horse, Bailey. But are you sure you can handle living with them?" I looked at Elliot. He was watching me. waiting for my resolve to crack. I can handle it, I told Lena, the next morning, at 9 o'clock. I stood on the porch of my own house. I was wearing the same clothes I had left in. I looked tired. I did not have to pretend. I felt like I had aged 10 years in one night. I unlocked the door and walked in. They were all in the kitchen. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. A domestic scene that felt perverse given the violence of yesterday. Graham looked up, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked annoyed. "I thought I told you to leave," he said. I did not scream. I did not cry. I pulled a document out of my purse and placed it on the island counter. "I have nowhere to go." "Graham," I said. My voice was small. I practiced making it tremble. "I cannot afford a hotel. I spoke to a lawyer. If you let me stay for 21 days, just until the first of the month so I can find a rental, I will sign whatever you want. I won't fight for the house. I won't fight for the alimony. I just need a roof." Sloane narrowed her eyes. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was mine. She was drinking from my favorite mug. "Absolutely not," Sloane said. "Get out." But Marjorie intervened. She was sitting at the head of the table, looking like a queen holding court. She picked up the document Lena had drafted. She read the clause about me waiving the right to contest the initial separation date. She smiled. It was a cruel, satisfied smile. "Oh, let her stay." "Sloane," Marjorie said, waving her hand dismissively. "Look at her. She is pathetic. Where is she going to go? The homeless shelter? Besides, having her here will be useful. She can pack up the boxes in the garage while she is here." Graham looked at Sloane, then at his mother. He shrugged. "Fine," Graham said. 3 weeks, but you stay in the guest room downstairs, and you do not touch anything that isn't yours." I looked at the floor to hide the spark of triumph in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. I moved my things into the small, cramped guest room off the laundry area. It smelled of detergent and neglect. I unpacked my bag. Hidden at the bottom, wrapped in a pair of socks, was a small digital voice recorder Elliot had given me. Elliot had given me 3 rules before I left the motel. He had made me repeat them until I had them memorized. Rule number 1. Do not confront. If Sloane insults you, take it. If Graham ignores you, let him. If Marjorie mocks you, agree with her. We need them to feel safe. We need them to talk openly in front of you. Rule number 2. Do not threaten. If you hint that you know about the money, they will shut down the operation. You have to be the ignorant ex-wife. You have to be the woman who thinks Velvet Horizon Ventures is just a boring investment fund. Rule number 3. Document everything. I sat on the narrow twin bed in the guest room. I could hear footsteps upstairs, the heavy, confident click of Sloane's heels. I took a deep breath. I was in. I was the spy in my own life. Later that afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Sloane was on the phone. She was leaning against the counter, tracing the rim of a wine glass. She saw me come in, but she did not lower her voice. She wanted me to hear. She wanted to assert her dominance. "It is all handled." "Babe," Sloane said into the phone. "Yeah. The transfer cleared this morning. We are going to double it by next week. The family is fully on board. They are practically throwing the checkbook at me." She laughed. It was a cold, metallic sound. I stood by the sink, filling my glass. I kept my head down. I looked like a beaten woman. But inside my pocket, my hand was wrapped around the small black recorder, and the red light was blinking. Sloane hung up and turned to me. "You know, Bailey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It is really sad. Graham says you never supported his dreams. That is why he had to find someone who understands finance." I took a sip of water. The urge to throw the glass in her face was overwhelming. I wanted to tell her that I knew she was a fraud. I wanted to tell her that her husband was sitting in a motel room 3 miles away, tracking her IP address. Instead, I remembered rule number 1. "You are right," I said softly. "I was never good with money. I hope you can help him." Sloane beamed. She preened like a peacock. "Oh, I will," she said. "I am going to change this family's fortune forever." I walked back to my room, closed the door, and exhaled. She had no idea how right she was. She was going to change their fortune. She was going to erase it, and I was going to be the one to hand Elliot the eraser. I spent the next 48 hours perfecting the art of surrender. I walked around the house with slumped shoulders, wearing no makeup, my hair tied back in a messy, defeated knot. I avoided eye contact. When Graham walked into a room, I shrank back, making myself small, making myself invisible. "I am sorry," I told him on the second morning, my voice barely a whisper as I poured his coffee. "I overreacted the other day. I was just in shock. I know we have grown apart. I just want to handle this peacefully." Graham looked at me over the rim of his mug. He smirked. It was the look of a man who believed he had broken a wild horse. "I am glad you finally came to your senses. Bailey," he said, "let's just get the paperwork done and move on." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I would like to organize the files in the study." I said, "If I am leaving, I need to separate my personal documents from the house records. I want to make sure I leave everything in order for you and Sloan." Graham waved his hand dismissively. "Knock yourself out. Just do not touch my current deal files." He left for the office, whistling. He thought I was decluttering. He did not know I was conducting a forensic audit. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. I did not just sort papers. I dissected them. I had my phone in my pocket, the camera app open, ready to digitize every single piece of incriminating evidence I could find. I started in the main filing cabinet in the study. Most of it was standard, utility bills, mortgage statements, but Graham was sloppy. He relied on physical paper for things he did not want on the cloud, thinking the lock on the study door was enough. He forgot that I had been the one to call the locksmith when we lost the keys 3 years ago. I still had the spare master key taped under the bottom drawer of the desk in the guest room. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It was stuffed with files labeled with Marjorie's handwriting. I pulled out a thick folder marked Retirement. My mother-in-law was a meticulous hoarder of financial statements. I flipped through the pages. There was a withdrawal request form from her teacher's pension fund dated 2 weeks ago. She had liquidated a lump sum of $85,000. I turned the page. There was a wire transfer receipt. The recipient was Velvet Horizon Ventures. Marjorie was not just investing. She was emptying her safety net. She was pouring her life savings into a black hole because Sloan had promised her the moon. I snapped a photo, then I moved to Graham's desk. I found his physical calendar, the leather-bound planner he carried everywhere, but had left behind today in his arrogance. I opened it to the last 6 months. I placed it next to the bank statements I had retrieved from the trash bin earlier. Statements he had shredded only vertically, not cross-cut. It had taken me 2 hours and a roll of Scotch tape to reassemble them, but the picture they painted was clear. I cross-referenced the dates. On May 15th, Graham had written "Business Trip Chicago" in his planner. On May 16th, a transfer of $12,000 went to Velvet Horizon. On June 20th, client meeting, New York. On June 21st, another transfer, $8,000. The pattern was absolute. Every time he claimed to be out of town for work, he was actually moving money. He wasn't traveling for the firm. He was traveling to sign documents in person, likely to bypass the dual signature requirement we had set up on our primary investment accounts years ago. He was forging my consent in person, likely with a notary he had compromised or bribed. Suddenly, I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor upstairs. Sloan was awake. I froze. I shoved the papers back into the drawer and slid the calendar under a stack of magazines. I grabbed a dust rag and started wiping the bookshelf furiously. Sloan walked past the open study door. She was on her phone, a device pressed to her ear, her other hand gesturing wildly as if the person on the other end could see her. I walked to the doorway, staying in the shadows. I pulled the digital recorder from my pocket and pressed the red button. "She is totally clueless," Sloan was saying. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Yeah, I got the old lady to liquidate the pension. 85 grand. Easy money. My commission on that alone is going to be 15%. I held my breath. "Yeah, The account is set up in the Caymans. Sloane continued. They think it is a high-yield growth fund. They do not know it is a pass-through. Once the money hits the Horizon account, I move it to the shell in 3 days. By the time they realize the returns are fake, I will be in Paris. She paused, listening to the other person. Don't worry, Sloane said. Graham is an idiot. He thinks he is a wolf, but he is just a sheep with a credit card. She walked out onto the patio, her voice fading. I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I had her. I had her confessing to fraud, embezzlement, and predatory intent. But I was not done. I needed to know how deep Graham was buried. I went back to the desk. I needed to access his email. I knew he never logged out of his accounts on the family iPad. I found it tucked between 2 books on the shelf. I woke the screen. It was locked, but the passcode was his birthday. Predictable. I bypassed his primary inbox and went straight to the trash folder. He thought deleting emails made them disappear. He forgot that trash is just another folder until you empty it. I found an email from a lender I did not recognize. The subject line was, Confirmation of Guarantor Status. I opened it. My blood ran cold. It was not just the line of credit on the house. Graham had taken out a business performance bond, a guarantee for a high-risk construction project his firm was underwriting. But he hadn't used the firm's assets as collateral. He had used my personal portfolio, the stocks I had inherited from my grandfather, the ones I had kept separate from our marriage. He had forged my signature to make me the guarantor. If the project failed, and looking at the risk assessment attached to the email, it was 90% likely to fail. I would not just lose my savings. I would be liable for a debt of $250,000. He had not just stolen from me. He had set a financial bomb under my life and handed me the detonator. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a secure message from Elliot. I opened the app. Elliot. I ran the corporate structure on Velvet Horizon. It is a ghost town. Bailey, no employees, no physical office, no registered trading license. It is a classic Ponzi shell. The only officer listed is a man named Arthur Vane. That is the alias Sloane used in her last scam in Seattle. The money goes in, sits for 48 hours, and then wire transfers to a crypto exchange. There is no investment. I looked at the screen. I looked at the pile of taped-together bank statements. I looked at the iPad with the forged guarantee. I had enough. I had enough to bury them all. I opened the secure cloud storage app Greyquill used. I started uploading. Photo 1. Marjorie's pension withdrawal. Uploading. Photo 2. The reassembled bank statements showing the transfers. Uploading. Photo 3. The photo of Graham's calendar showing the fake business trips. Uploading. Audio file. Sloane's confession about the commission and the Caymans. Uploading. Screenshot. The email proving Graham used me as a guarantor for the business debt. Uploading. The progress bar moved slowly. 20%, 50%, 80%. I heard the front door open. Graham was home early. I did not panic. I watched the bar hit 100%. File transfer complete. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and the iPad back onto the shelf. I grabbed the dust rag again. Graham walked into the study. He looked at me, then at the dust rag. Still cleaning? He asked, loosening his tie. Just finishing up, I said, my voice steady, my eyes clear. I found a lot of interesting things today. Graham. He did not catch the double meaning. He just grunted and walked toward the liquor cabinet. I walked out of the room. My phone buzzed again. A single text from Elliot. I looked at it. Elliot. Received. The file is locked and replicated on 3 servers. It is over. Bailey. They are dead in the water. Now we pick the stage. I smiled. I did not smile like a victim. I smiled like the director of the show. Let's pick a big one. I whispered to the empty hallway. The transformation did not happen in a salon. It happened in a small, sterile cubicle at a credit union 3 towns over. Lena Parkhurst had given me strict instructions. I was to open an account in my name only. at a bank where neither Graham nor Marjorie had ever set foot. I sat across from a young loan officer, his name tag reading David, and handed him a check for $6,000. It was the last of my grandmother's inheritance that I had managed to salvage from an old bond that Graham had forgotten existed. "This is your freedom fund," Lena had told me. "Do not touch it for groceries. Do not touch it for gas. This is for your new life." I signed the paperwork. For the first time in years, my hand did not shake. I walked out of that bank not as Mrs. Graham Wexler, the dependent spouse, but as Bailey Cook, a solvent individual. The air outside tasted different. It tasted like autonomy. My next stop was not a shopping mall to buy a revenge dress. That was the stuff of movies. I needed armor, not a costume. I went to a consignment shop that specialized in high-end corporate wear. I bought 3 tailored blazers in charcoal, navy, and black. I bought trousers that allowed me to move quickly. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I stopped wearing the pastel cardigans Marjorie insisted made me look approachable. I did not want to be approachable. I wanted to be formidable. I went to the local library to use their private meeting room and made a call I had been dreading for 5 years. I dialed the number for Northline Advisory. Marcus, my old manager, picked up on the second ring. "Bailey?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine surprise. "Is that really you?" "I need work." "Marcus," I said. I did not offer a sob story. I did not mention the divorce. I kept it professional. "I am available for short-term contract work in risk assessment and forensic auditing. I am sharper than I was when I left." There was a pause. "We actually have a compliance crisis with a client in the tech sector." Marcus said, "I have been drowning. If you can start remotely next week, the contract is yours. The rate is $70 an hour." I accepted immediately. I hung up the phone and felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of my own spine straightening. I had a job. I had money. I was no longer a guest in my own life. Back at the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. Marjorie and Sloane had noticed the change in me, and they hated it. They expected me to be weeping in the corner. Instead, I was walking with a purpose. I was efficient. I cleaned the house not like a maid, but like a logistics manager clearing a site. Elliot sent me a secure message detailing the protocol for the evidence. "Chain of custody is everything. Bailey," he wrote, "if we go to court, Graham's lawyer will claim the files were altered. You need to log everything: date created, date accessed, the device ID it came from, the server it was uploaded to. Do not just take screenshots. Download the metadata." I spent my nights in the guest room building a master spreadsheet. It was a thing of beauty. Column A, the lie. Column B, the truth. Column C, the proof. I had Graham's fake business trips matched with the bank transfers. I had Sloane's phone calls matched with the offshore account creation dates. I was building a cage around them, bar by bar, using their own actions as the steel. Marjorie and Sloane tried to escalate. They wanted to break my composure. On Thursday afternoon, I was sweeping the front porch. Marjorie was having tea with Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Klein, 2 of the neighborhood gossips. "Bailey!" Marjorie shouted, her voice shrill enough to carry across the lawn. "Make sure you scrub the mud off the steps. We cannot have the place looking like a slum just because you are too lazy to bend down." Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable. Marjorie winked at her, as if they were sharing a joke about incompetent help. Sloane walked out. Wearing a new pair of sunglasses that I knew cost $400, she stepped right where I had just swept, tracking dirt onto the clean wood. "Oops," Sloane said, not looking at me. "Missed a spot. Honey, in the past, I would have apologized. I would have felt the heat of shame burning my cheeks. But today, I just looked at the dirt. I looked at Sloane's shoes. Then I looked her directly in the eyes. My face was a mask of absolute indifference. "I will get right on that," I said. My tone was flat. It was the tone you use with a toddler who has just spilled juice. It was not submission. It was patience. Sloane frowned. She took off her sunglasses. She expected resistance. She expected me to fight back so she could play the victim. My refusal to engage confused her. It made her sloppy. She turned to Marjorie and said, loudly, heavily, God, I cannot wait until we move to the new estate. The air here is just so stale. I mentally noted the phrase, new estate. I added it to my mental file. They were planning to buy property, probably with the loan money Graham had secured against my credit. That evening, the breakthrough happened. Graham came home early again. He was carrying a bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He called Sloane and Marjorie into the living room. He did not invite me, but I was in the kitchen, and sound travels perfectly through the ventilation ducts if you know where to stand. It is happening. Graham announced, I just got the confirmation from Arthur at the firm. The initial investment has matured. The payout is scheduled for next Friday. Sloane shrieked with delight. The sound was piercing. How much? Marjorie asked, her voice greedy. Triple, Graham said. We are getting back 3 times what we put in, plus the bonus from the new partners. Next Friday, Sloane said. That is the 15th. Exactly, Graham said. We are going to throw a party. A real party. I want to invite the whole neighborhood. I want to show everyone that the Wexler family is back on top. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter. My heart was not racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. Next Friday, the 15th, they believed the money was coming back. They believed the Ponzi scheme was a legitimate investment that was about to pay out. They were going to host a victory lap on the very day they were scheduled to lose everything. Graham's arrogance had given me the timeline. He had just handed me the date of his own execution. I waited until the noise in the living room died down. I waited until I heard them clinking glasses, toasting to a future that did not exist. I walked quietly back to the guest room. I sat on the narrow bed and pulled out my phone. I opened the encrypted chat with Elliot. I did not need to ask him if the evidence was ready. I knew it was. I did not need to ask if Lena had the legal filings prepared. I knew she did. All that was left was the stage. I typed 4 words. Pick the date. I am ready. I hit send. I stared at the wall, listening to the muffled laughter from the living room. Laugh while you can. Graham. Laugh while you can. Sloane. Because when the curtain rises next Friday, nobody is going to be clapping. The transformation of our home into a theater of the absurd began on a Tuesday morning. Marjorie did not just decide to host a party. She decided to host a coronation. She called it an engagement announcement, a title that was legally impossible given that her son was still married to the woman currently scrubbing the baseboards in the hallway. But facts had never stopped Marjorie before, and they certainly were not going to stop her now that she believed the Wexler family was about to ascend to the tax bracket of the gods. She spent 3 days curating the guest list. It was a roster of the most influential and gossipy people in Cedarbrook. She invited the president of the Homeowners Association, the local bank manager, and the entire board of the charity league she had been trying to join for 2 decades. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses to her triumph. She had no idea she was actually assembling a jury. Sloane was the artistic director of this farce. She floated through the house, pointing at furniture she wanted moved and drapes she wanted replaced. She treated me not like an ex-wife, but like a vendor she had hired on the cheap. Bailey, Sloane said, walking into the kitchen where I was quietly drinking black coffee. We need to talk about the catering. I put my mug down. I listened. I do not trust the local catering companies. Sloane continued, examining her manicure. They are so tacky, and since you are staying here rent-free, Graham and I thought it would be appropriate for you to handle the food. Nothing too complicated, just elegant finger foods, canapes, smoked salmon. You know, things that look expensive. She paused, waiting for me to object. She wanted me to throw the coffee in her face. She wanted me to scream that I was not her servant. She wanted a reaction she could use to justify kicking me out before the big day. I looked at her. I saw the desperation in her eyes. She needed friction to feel powerful. I decided to starve her of it. That sounds reasonable, I said. My voice was as smooth as glass. I can prepare the menu. I will make sure the champagne is chilled and the glasses are polished. Sloane blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked disappointed. "Oh," she said. "Well, good. Just make sure you wear something unobtrusive. We do not want the help distracting from the guests of honor." "I will wear black," I said. "I will be invisible." She stormed out, frustrated by my compliance. She did not understand that I was not agreeing to be a server. I was agreeing to be the stage manager. As soon as she left, I went to my room and pulled up the guest list Marjorie had left on the dining table. I took a photo of it. I sent it immediately to Lena Parkhurst. "I need you to cross-reference these names." I typed, "I want to know who here has legal standing in the community. I want to know who loves a scandal." Lena replied 4 minutes later. "This is perfect," she wrote. "You have half the town council coming. If Graham admits to financial fraud in front of these people, the testimony will be unimpeachable. We are not just winning a lawsuit, Bailey. We are destroying his reputation in the zip code." Meanwhile, Elliot was assembling the payload. We met briefly at a gas station 3 miles away, parking our cars on opposite sides of the pump, so it looked like a coincidence. He handed me a heavy, waterproof flash drive. "This is it," Elliot said. He looked tired, but his eyes were burning with a terrifying focus. "I have the marriage certificate proving she is still my wife. I have the wire transfers from your husband's account to the shell company. I have the audio recording of her admitting the fraud. And I have the whistleblower complaint I filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission this morning." He paused, looking at the house in the distance. "I also found the bond," he said quietly. "The one Graham signed using your name. The construction project failed yesterday. The default notice is in the mail. If we do not stop this now, the bank comes for you next week. We will stop it." I said, "Friday. I need a way in." Elliot said, "I cannot just kick down the door. I need to be invited. If I break in, they can call the police and claim harassment. If I am a guest, I have the floor." I nodded. "I have a plan for that." That evening, I found Graham in the living room. He was watching a golf tournament, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had gotten away with murder. "Graham," I said, standing in the doorway. He did not look away from the screen. "What is it?" "I have finished the prep for the party," I said. "The food is ordered. The house is clean." "Good," he grunted. "I have a small request." I said, "Since I'm doing all the work, and since we are trying to keep things civil, I would like to invite one person. Just a friend. Someone to help me in the kitchen so I'm not overwhelmed." Graham finally looked at me. He laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "A friend?" he asked. He looked at me with genuine pity. "Bailey, since when do you have friends? I thought you alienated everyone years ago." I kept my face neutral. I swallowed the insult. "Just an old colleague." I said, "You probably do not remember him. He is quiet. He won't be in the way." Graham waved his hand dismissively, turning back to the golf game. "Fine," he said. "Invite your imaginary friend. Just make sure he doesn't eat all the shrimp." I walked away. My heart was hammering against my ribs. He had just signed his own death warrant. He was so convinced of my isolation, so convinced of my pathetic status, that he did not even ask for a name. Thursday arrived, the day before the event. The house was buzzing with manic energy. Marjorie was arranging flowers with a violence that suggested she was strangling them. Sloane was pacing the floor. Wearing a new dress that shimmered under the chandelier, she held up her hand to catch the light. A diamond bracelet dangled from her wrist. It was thick, heavy, and undeniably real. "Do you like it?" Sloane asked me as I wiped down the counter. "Graham gave it to me this morning. An early celebration gift. He said it matches my eyes." I looked at the bracelet. I knew exactly how much it cost. I had seen the withdrawal from the home equity line of credit 2 days ago. $4,500. It did not match her eyes. It matched the debt that was currently attached to my credit score. "It is beautiful," I said. "It looks very expensive." Sloane smirked. "Quality usually is, but I suppose you wouldn't know much about that. Would you? Bailey? Graham told me you always preferred to save money rather than enjoy it. That is why he was so bored." A man like Graham needs a woman who knows how to shine. I gripped the dish rag tighter. You are right, I said. I was always too focused on the risks. I never looked at the rewards. Sloane laughed and walked away to show Marjorie the bracelet. They cooed over it together. Two vultures admiring a shiny piece of glass, unaware that they were standing on a trapdoor. That night, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room. I was holding the black dress I would wear tomorrow. It was simple, severe, and blended into the shadows. It was the uniform of a servant. But as I looked at my reflection, I did not see a servant. I saw a sniper waiting in the tall grass. I received a text from Elliot. Is the gate code the same? I typed back. Yes, 7742. Arrive at 8:15. I will open the door. I put the phone down. They wanted a show. They wanted to parade their stolen happiness in front of the town. They wanted to show the world that they had won and that I had been discarded like a wrapper. I touched the cold glass of the mirror. I will give you a show. I whispered to the empty room. You want a drama? I will give you a tragedy. You want a twist? I will give you the truth. The script was written. The cast was assembled. And tomorrow, the curtain would rise on the final act of the Wexler family. The Friday of the party arrived not with a whimper, but with the roar of luxury engines in the driveway. By 7:30 in the evening, my house was no longer a home. It was a showroom. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roast beef, and the metallic tang of greed. Marjorie had outdone herself. She had invited everyone who mattered in Cedarbrook, from the head of the Rotary Club to the senior partners of Graham's firm. She moved through the crowd in a gold sequined dress, laughing too loudly, touching arms, and accepting compliments that she had not earned. She looked like a queen surveying a kingdom she had just stolen. I was the ghost at the feast. I wore my simple black dress and stood near the kitchen pass-through, ensuring the trays of canapés were replenished. I was efficient. I was invisible. To the guests, I was just the tragic ex-wife who was pathetic enough to cater her own replacement's debut. They whispered when I walked by. I heard snippets of their pity. Poor Bailey. She just could not keep up. Graham needed someone with more ambition. I let them whisper. Every word they said, every nod of agreement they gave to Marjorie's lies, was just cementing their status as witnesses. Sloane was in her element. She was wearing a white silk gown that looked suspiciously bridal. She held a glass of vintage champagne in one hand and Graham's arm in the other. Every time she saw me, her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. She did not just want to win, she wanted to hunt. She cornered me near the beverage station around 8 o'clock. The noise of the party was a dull roar behind us. Sloane leaned in close, smelling of vanilla and arrogance. You know, Bailey, she whispered, her voice low enough that only I could hear. You really are good at this. Serving people. It suits you. Maybe when you leave, I can write you a reference letter for a housekeeping job. She paused, waiting for me to crack. She wanted tears. She wanted me to throw a drink. She wanted a reason to have me escorted out by security. I did not blink. I picked up a napkin and wiped a microscopic spot of water from the marble counter. Thank you. Sloane, I said. I aim to please. Sloane frowned. My lack of reaction was boring her. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Graham told me you are leaving on Monday. Make sure you take everything. I do not want to find any of your cheap polyester clothes in my closet. I looked up then. I looked her straight in the eyes. I decided to plant a single seed of doubt, just to watch it grow in the next 10 minutes. I will be gone soon, I said calmly. But I was wondering something. Sloane raised an eyebrow. What? You go by Sloane Hart, I said. I tilted my head slightly, acting purely curious. Is Hart your maiden name? Or is it a name you acquired recently? It sounds so established. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Sloane's eyes widened. Her grip on the champagne flute tightened until her knuckles turned white. It was a tiny reaction, a micro-expression of fear. But I saw it. She had not expected me to ask about her history. She thought I was a small-town mouse who knew nothing of the world outside Cedarbrook. Before she could answer, the The music died down. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. It was Graham. He was standing by the fireplace, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. He waved for silence. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to him. Sloane shook off her unease and pasted her smile back on. Hurrying to his side, I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. Pulling out my phone, I opened the voice recorder app. This was it. "Welcome, everyone," Graham boomed. His voice projected to the back of the room. "Thank you for coming to celebrate with us. I know there have been some changes in the Wexler household recently." A few guests chuckled nervously. Graham laughed with them. "But change is good," Graham continued. "Change is profitable. Many of you know I have been working on a massive transition. I am proud to announce that as of this week, the Wexler family has fully bought into the future. We have moved our primary assets into a new venture, Velvet Horizon." I watched the recording timer tick upward. He had just admitted to moving the assets. "We are not just talking about savings," Graham bragged, gesturing with his glass. "We leveraged everything, and I am happy to tell you that by next week, we are looking at a 300% return. We are going to put this town on the map." The room erupted in applause. The neighbors clapped. The bank manager nodded approvingly. They were cheering for a crime. Marjorie stepped forward. Unable to let Graham have all the spotlight, she raised her own glass. "And because of my son's brilliance," she announced, beaming at the crowd, "we have already placed a deposit on the Miller estate on the hill. We are closing next month." I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. The Miller estate was a $4 million property. By announcing the deposit, Marjorie had just proven intent to dissipate assets. She had proven she was spending money that legally still belonged partially to me. Money that was currently sitting in a Ponzi scheme shell account. My phone buzzed against my thigh. A single vibration. I looked down at the screen. Sender. Elliot. Message. "I am outside. 60 seconds. I looked at the room. Graham was kissing Sloane. Marjorie was accepting a hug from the mayor's wife. They were at the absolute peak of their delusion. It was time to bring them down. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I smoothed the front of my black dress. I walked out of the shadows. I did not walk like a servant. I walked like a CEO entering a boardroom. I walked straight to the center of the room, right next to the fireplace where Graham stood. Graham saw me coming. His smile faltered. He looked annoyed. "Bailey?" he hissed. "What are you doing? Go back to the kitchen." I ignored him. I picked up a spoon from the appetizer tray and tapped it against an empty champagne glass. Ding, ding. Ding! The sound cut through the chatter. The room went silent again. People looked confused. Why was the ex-wife, the woman who was supposed to be invisible, demanding attention? Graham moved to grab my arm, but I stepped out of his reach. "I am so sorry to interrupt," I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. I projected it to the back of the room. Just like Graham had, I just wanted to add a small toast, since we are all sharing such big news tonight. Sloane stared at me. She looked like she was about to scream. Marjorie looked like she was about to faint. They were terrified I was going to make a scene. They thought I was going to cry about the divorce. I smiled at them. It was a genuine smile. "I am so happy for Graham and Sloane." I said, "Truly, it is rare to see two people who deserve each other so completely. And hearing about the investments in Velvet Horizon, it is fascinating." I saw Graham relax slightly. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was sucking up to him in public, but I continued, my voice hardening just a fraction. "A celebration this big feels incomplete without all the family present." So, I took the liberty of inviting one more guest. Graham frowned. "Who?" I turned to the front door. The timing was perfect. The doorbell rang. It was a loud, clear chime that echoed through the silent house. I looked back at Graham. "I think you should meet him," I said. "He has traveled a very long way to see where his money went." I walked past Graham. I walked past Sloane, who was now trembling, though she did not know why. I walked past Marjorie, who was clutching her pearls. I walked to the front door. The hallway felt like a tunnel. Every eye in the room was on my back. I reached for the handle. My hand was steady. I turned the lock. I pulled the door open. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and justice. And there, standing on the porch under the yellow light, was not a ghost. It was a man in a dark suit, holding a briefcase that contained the end of their world. I stepped aside. "Please, come in," I said. "We were just talking about you." Elliot Hart stepped into the hallway. He did not look like a guest. He looked like a verdict. He wore a charcoal suit that was cut with surgical precision, and his presence sucked the oxygen right out of the foyer. He did not smile. He did not offer a polite nod to the host. He walked past me with the steady, terrifying cadence of a man who has already dug the graves and is just here to deliver the bodies. The silence in the living room was absolute. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The murmurs of admiration for Graham's speech had died in the throats of the guests. They sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. They looked from me to the stranger in the doorway, their eyes wide with the hunger for scandal. I walked up beside Elliot. I felt a surge of power that was intoxicating. "Everyone," I said, my voice ringing clear in the sudden quiet, "I would like you to meet Elliot. He is not a caterer. He is not a neighbor. He is someone very important to the truth." I looked at Sloane. She had turned around slowly. Her face, which had been flushed with champagne and victory just seconds ago, was now the color of old parchment. Her eyes were locked on Elliot. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was a silent scream of recognition. Then, gravity took over. The crystal champagne flute in her hand slipped through her fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a violence that sounded like a gunshot. Shards of glass exploded outward, scattering across the Persian rug Marjorie was so proud of. The expensive vintage champagne pooled around Sloane's designer shoes, soaking the hem of her white dress. She did not look down. She could not look away from Elliot. "Husband?" she choked out. The word was strangled, barely more than a gasp, but in the silence of the room, it was deafening. A ripple went through the crowd. It started as a low hum and exploded into a cacophony of whispers. "Husband?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice carrying over the din. "Did she just say husband? I thought she was Graham's fiancé." Another voice hissed. "If he is her husband, then what is Graham?" the bank manager asked, looking at my husband with sudden suspicion. Graham stood frozen by the fireplace. His face was a mask of confusion that was rapidly crumbling into horror. He looked at Sloane, then at Elliot, then back at Sloane. "Sloane?" Graham asked, his voice cracking. "Who is this? Why did you call him that?" Elliot did not shout. He did not make a scene. He simply walked into the center of the room, stepped over the broken glass, and placed a thick leather briefcase on the coffee table. He opened it. The click of the latches was the loudest sound in the world. He pulled out a document and laid it flat on the table, smoothing it out with his hand. "I am Elliot Hart," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and devoid of any emotion. "And that woman, who you know as Sloane, is my legal wife. We have been married for 5 years. We are not divorced. We are not separated." He pulled out another document. "And this," Elliot continued, placing a stack of bank records next to the marriage license, "is a forensic accounting of the funds she has been siphoning from my company for the last 18 months. She has a talent for finding people who are eager to be rich and making them poor." Sloane was shaking now. Her hands were trembling so violently that the diamond bracelet Graham had stolen from our future to buy her was rattling against her wrist. "Elliot, please," she whispered. "We can talk about this. Not here." "There is nothing to talk about," Elliot said. He turned to Graham. Graham was leaning against the mantelpiece as if his legs had stopped working. "Mr. Wexler," Elliot said, "you mentioned Velvet Horizon Ventures in your speech. You said you were expecting a 300% return next Friday." Graham nodded dumbly. "Yes, Arthur told me Arthur Vane does not exist." Elliot interrupted. "Arthur Vane is an alias my wife uses when she sets up shell corporations. Velvet Horizon is not an investment fund. It is a laundering terminal." Elliot pulled out a final sheet of paper. It was a flowchart. It showed arrows moving from the Wexler accounts to Velvet Horizon, and then immediately out to an offshore account in the Caymans. "The money you transferred," Elliot said, pointing to the red lines on the chart. "The home equity line, the pension fund your mother liquidated, the construction bond you secured with Bailey's portfolio. It is all gone. It was never invested. It was stolen." Marjorie let out a sound that was half sob, half shriek. She slumped onto the sofa, clutching her chest. "My pension?" she wailed. "The Miller estate? I put the deposit down." "You put a deposit down with funds that do not exist," Elliot said coldly. "You are not buying a mansion. Mrs. Wexler, you are technically an accessory to wire fraud. By soliciting investments from your neighbors based on false returns, you have implicated yourself in a federal crime." The room erupted. The guests who had been clapping for Graham 5 minutes ago were now backing away, checking their phones, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius. The Homeowners Association president was already whispering to her husband that they needed to leave. Graham looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was realizing for the first time that his parents could not fix it. "Bailey," he stammered. "Bailey, tell them this is a mistake. You handled the paperwork. You organized the files. Tell them." I stepped forward. The crowd parted for me. I was no longer the shadow in the corner. I was the only thing in the room that was real. "I did organize the files." "Graham," I said softly. I reached into my purse, the cheap black purse I had bought at the consignment store, and pulled out a single flash drive. I held it up. It caught the light of the chandelier. "I organized everything." I said, "I have the emails where you forged my signature on the loan documents. I have the audio recording of Sloan bragging about her commission on your mother's pension. I have the dates. I have the times. I have the IP addresses." Sloan lunged. It was a desperate, feral move. She tried to grab the flash drive from my hand, but Elliot was faster. He stepped between us, blocking her path with his shoulder. Sloan recoiled, breathing hard, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "It is over." "Sloan," Elliot said, "the police are already at the gate. I filed the report an hour ago." Graham sank to his knees. He did not fall. He just crumbled. He looked at the floor, at the shards of glass, at the ruin of his life. "Why?" he whispered. "Bailey, why did you let it go this far?" I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just the cool, clinical satisfaction of a job completed. "You brought her into our house, Graham." I said, "You told me to leave. You told me to sign the papers. You wanted a new life." I gestured to the room, to the whispering guests, to the crying mother, to the criminal wife. "I just wanted to make sure you got exactly what you paid for." I said. I leaned down so my face was level with his. He smelled of sweat and fear. "So, Graham," I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and final. "You have a choice to make right now. Do you want me to sign the divorce papers and walk away as a witness? Or do you want to stay married so you can sign the confession as a co-conspirator?" Graham looked up at me. He saw the truth in my eyes. He saw that I was the only life raft left in the ocean he had drowned himself in. "Divorce," he choked out. "I want the divorce." I stood up and smoothed my dress. "Good choice," I said. I turned to Elliot. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement between soldiers. I walked to the front door, stepping over the threshold for the last time, behind me. I heard the wail of sirens approaching up the long, winding driveway. The party was over. The cleanup was just beginning. But for the first time in my life, the mess was not mine to clean. The aftermath of the party was not a scene of emotional chaos for me. I did not stay to watch the police take statements or to see Marjorie weep into her ruined carpet. I left that melodrama to them, for me. The real work began on Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. When the courthouse doors opened, I did not file for a separation. I filed for a scorched earth divorce. Lena Parkhurst was a shark in a sea of goldfish. She moved with a speed that made Graham's head spin. By noon on Monday, we had a temporary restraining order freezing every single asset Graham and Marjorie touched. They could not buy a gallon of milk without a judge's permission. The beauty of the party was not just the public humiliation, it was the evidence. Lena subpoenaed the guests. She called the bank manager who had been drinking Graham's scotch. She called the Homeowners Association president, who had heard Marjorie brag about the new estate. You see, Lena explained to the judge during the preliminary hearing, Mr. Wexler and his mother publicly admitted to liquidating marital assets, specifically my client's equity, to fund a speculative venture without her consent. We have 20 witnesses who heard them boast about the transaction. Graham's lawyer tried to argue that it was a joint investment strategy, but Lena played the recording of Sloan laughing about the commission. She played the recording of Graham admitting he forged the signatures on the loan documents. The defense did not just crumble, it evaporated. Elliot did not rest either. He filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding the operations of Velvet Horizon Ventures. He provided the forensic map of the money laundering scheme, because Sloan had used Graham's accounts to move the stolen funds. Graham was named as a person of interest in a federal investigation. He was suspended from his firm immediately. A finance guy with a fraud investigation attached to his name is about as employable as a lifeguard who cannot swim. 2 weeks before the final settlement hearing, Graham tried to corner me. I was leaving Lena's office, carrying a box of files. He looked terrible. He had lost 20 pounds. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like a man who had not slept since the night of the party. Bailey, he said, stepping in front of me on the sidewalk. Please, we can stop this. I can talk to the firm. We can pay off the loan. I made a mistake. I got caught up in the excitement. But we were good once. We can start over. I looked at him. I looked for a shred of the man I had once loved. But all I saw was a desperate stranger looking for a life raft. Start over? I asked, my voice flat and devoid of any warmth. You do not want me back. Graham, you want your guarantor back. You want the woman who stayed quiet while you played big shot. I love you, he said. It sounded like a rehearsed line from a bad movie. I shifted the box of files to my other hip. You never loved me. I said, you loved the fact that I made your life easy. You loved that I was the safety net you could cut whenever you wanted to fly. But the net is gone. Graham, you are just falling now. I walked past him. I did not look back. Marjorie fared no better. She tried to turn the family narrative against me. She went to the grocery store and told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated Graham, that I was a vindictive woman who had ruined her son's brilliant career. But small towns talk. The neighbors who had been at the party knew the truth. They knew she was the one who had greedily handed over her pension to a con artist. When Marjorie walked down the aisle at church, people did not look at her with respect anymore. They looked at her with pity. She was no longer the matriarch of Cedarbrook. She was just a foolish old woman who had been tricked by a pair of red-bottomed shoes. The final court date was a massacre. The judge, a stern woman with zero patience for white-collar nonsense, reviewed the evidence of the forged line of credit. She ruled that since the debt was secured through identity theft, I was not liable for a single penny of the $50,000. Graham was ordered to assume full responsibility for the loan, plus interest, plus my legal fees. Then came the final blow, the house. Marjorie stood up, defying her own lawyer's advice to sit down. It is my house, she shouted. The deed is in the Wexler name. She leaves with nothing. Lena Parkhurst stood up slowly. She handed a single piece of paper to the bailiff. It was a bank transfer record from 7 years ago. Your Honor, Lena said calmly, before the marriage, Ms. Cook transferred $40,000 from her personal savings, money inherited from her grandmother, to the Wexler family account to cover the down payment and closing costs of this property. We have the paper trail. It was not a gift. It was an investment. The judge looked at the document. She looked at Marjorie. The court finds that Ms. Cook holds a 30% equitable interest in the property. The judge ruled, the house will be sold. Ms. Cook will receive her initial investment plus appreciation. The remainder will be used to satisfy Mr. Wexler's outstanding debts. Marjorie collapsed into her chair. The house was gone. The legacy was gone. Graham just stared at the table. He knew it was over. The final judgment was swift. I received a settlement that restored everything they had tried to steal. Graham was stripped of his professional licenses due to the admitted forgery. He was now a man with a mountain of debt and no way to pay it. As for Sloane, she did not even make it to the hearing. Elliot had handed his files to the district attorney. She was picked up trying to board a flight to Mexico using a fake passport. She was currently trading her silk dresses for a gray jumpsuit, awaiting trial for grand larceny and wire fraud. 3 months later, I walked into the glass-walled lobby of Northline Advisory. I was not wearing a uniform. I was wearing a tailored navy suit that I had bought with my own money. I walked into the HR office. The manager slid a contract across the desk. It was a permanent position, senior risk analyst. The salary was double what I had made before I quit to be a wife. "Sign here," the manager said. I picked up the pen. My hand felt strong. I signed my name, Bailey Cook. No Mrs., no Wexler, just me. I walked out of the office and into the bustling city street. The sun was shining. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You think you won, but you just got lucky. Watch your back." I knew who it was. Sloane, using a smuggled phone, or maybe just a friend on the outside. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the need to hide. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to Lena and Elliot. Then I hit delete. I put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the subway. They had tried to break me. They had tried to erase me. But they forgot the first rule of risk management. Never underestimate the quiet ones. When you choose deceit as a weapon, do not be surprised if the truth becomes a hammer. Thank you so much for listening to my story and following this journey of justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed seeing the truth win, please subscribe to the Revengestories channel, smash that like button, and turn on notifications to help this story reach even more people.